as a student of history, one of my great heroes in American history is Abraham Lincoln, because he grew. He grew as a person in understanding the complexities about race and the interrelationships among the Union members. I fear that the party of Lincoln that led us in the 13th and 14th and 15th Amendments, that won the Civil War, is increasingly sounding like the party of Stonewall Jackson and Jefferson Davis. When they say it's not about race or partisanship, you can be sure it's about race and partisanship. And that's tragic, not only for you, but for the country. And if you don't believe that, look at the track record when Republicans take over state legislatures and governor's mansions, when it comes to voter suppression, when it comes to voter ID, when it comes to early voting to enable people to vote, consistently, they have suppressed. Why? Because they'd lose elections. This isn't about your right. They're not going to respect that. They're going to do everything they can to deny it, and have. I've heard the sanctimonious assertion, oh, I agree, people should be able to vote. Really? So when the delegate from D.C. was given the right to vote in the committee of the whole by the Democrats when they were in the majority, and when we lost that majority, what happened? Every time the Republicans took away her vote in the committee of the whole. So much for that commitment to your right to vote, even here, even in just the committee of the whole. So let's call this what it is. It's not about the Constitution. Clearly, there are implied powers in Article 1. It's absurd to insist there are only enumerated powers. There are implied powers in every article of the Constitution. Start with Article 2. There are no end to the implied powers of the executive. What about the implied powers of the legislature? We got them too. And one of them is to determine statehood. Mr. Thomas, do you know your history? A little bit?
So. I hope so.
Okay. So we've heard you can't carve out a state. Now, I come from Virginia, and we had this unpleasantness in 1862. Do you remember what happened to the western part of my state?
West Virginia was formed out of the state of Virginia.
Out of the state of Virginia. Now, was that done by a constitutional amendment, Mr. Thomas?
That was not done by constitutional
And does West Virginia continue to be a state in the Union today?
Yes.
And do you know how it happened? I'll tell you, because it had Union troops all over it. And we declared it a state, and it was ratified by Congress. No one argued you needed a constitutional amendment. Now, let me ask you another question. So, what year was the Constitution adopted? 1787.
1787, sorry.
That's your answer, and you're sticking to it, right? 1787. Did the District of Columbia exist in 1787?
No.
No. So, the writers of the Constitution are thinking we need a capital, and probably it's going to be a small administrative enclave. Is that correct?
Correct.
And they couldn't even agree where it would be. Is that true?
There was a lot of debate at the time.
More than debate. They couldn't agree on it until after the Republic, in fact, was up and functioning. Isn't that true?
Correct.
And wasn't there a famous dinner at Thomas Jefferson's house where he brought together Madison and Alexander Hamilton and hammered out a compromise about where it would be located? Is that not true?
That's true.
That I'd have to defer to your
That's true.
history.
Yeah, trust me on this one, Mr. Thomas. Work with me. Okay. So there was. And the deal was Alexander Hamilton got his deal on the debt. The federal government would take on the debt of the states from the Revolutionary War, and Madison, Washington, and Jefferson would get their capital, which they wanted in the Potomac. So the argument that, well, the Constitution never envisioned people voting in D.C. Yeah, they never envisioned a modern metropolis of 700,000 people. And had they, I know Madison would be the first to line up and give you the vote, not as a privilege, Not because you fought for the country, but because as Americans, it's your right.
The gentleman's time has expired, and we appreciate that deep and thoughtful history lesson. Mr. Massey?
Madam Chairman, may I respond to this remark that just came from Mr. Connolly?
Madam Chairman, if the gentleman from Cato wants to respond, and certainly he's free, I want to,
No,
two things.
who's asking to respond?
He's not designated to speak ex cathedra about the Constitution of the United States, and I want the right to respond.
The gentleman's time has expired.
It may have, but Mr. Pollan has no right to time either,
Well, I'm
and I
not
would
off-
appeal to the chair to be able to respond to his comment.
I'm sorry, Mr. Pollan. The gentleman's time has expired. If someone over on this side can offer you
Madam
his
I thank the
time.
chair.
Madam-
And I call now on Mr. Massey.
Madam Chairman, I've give at least 30 seconds to Dr. Pylon to respond.
Yes,
to
first
that
of all,
last
the
comment.
Constitution was not adopted in 1787. It was adopted, that is to say, ratified in 1788 when 9 states did so. More importantly, you allege that this is all about race and partisanship. I grant there are partisan elements to that. This is not about race. I urge you, I request that you withdraw that charge.
It's never.
Claiming,
It is about race and
reclaiming my
partisanship.
time, reclaiming my time. Gentlemen, Madam